cake stand was already on the counter when they walked in. I hadn't moved it. 41 years, and I never moved it from that spot, by the window. The same cast iron stand my mother brought from Savannah when she married my father. The same one I used to roll out pie dough on when I was 7 years old, and barely tall enough to reach. My daughter-in-law walked past it without looking. My son walked past it too. They sat down at my kitchen table like they had an appointment. I poured coffee. That's what I do. I poured coffee and cut 2 slices of the apple walnut cake I'd made that morning, and I set everything down and I sat across from them and I waited, because I could already feel something in the room that didn't belong there. Something I couldn't name yet, but recognized the way you recognize a smell from a long time ago before you can place it. Your whole body already knows. My daughter-in-law had a leather portfolio on her lap. She set it on the table between us before she said a single word. My son didn't meet my eyes. His name is James. He is 36 years old. He has his father's hands and his father's habit of going quiet when he knows something is wrong and can't find a way to say it. His father has been gone 11 years now. I raised James through the last of his teenage years, mostly on my own, worked double shifts at the bakery through his college applications, drove 4 hours each way twice a semester to watch him play lacrosse his junior year because he asked me to, and I would have driven 8. I say this not because I want credit for it. I say it because you should know who I was to him before I tell you what happened. His wife's name is Sasha. She came into our lives about 3 years ago, smart and polished and certain of herself in a way that I initially admired. She had opinions about everything, and she stated them clearly, and I thought, this is a woman who knows her own mind. That is a good thing to be. I wanted to like her. I tried very hard to like her. For 2 years I mostly succeeded. But there was always something underneath the politeness that felt like impatience, like she was tolerating the time she spent with me, calculating it, spending it carefully the way you spend money you expect to get back. I didn't say anything. She was my son's choice. You love who your children love. Whitmore's has been in our family since 1987. My mother and father opened it on a Tuesday in October with $400 in savings and a commercial oven they bought secondhand from a restaurant that had closed down in Asheville. By the time I took it over in 2003, we had 3 employees and a wholesale contract with 2 local grocery chains. Now we have 7 full-time staff, a storefront on Main Street that people drive 40 minutes for on weekends, and a mail-order operation I'd built during the pandemic that kept us alive when nothing else would have. The bakery's mine. I own the building. I own the equipment. I own the equipment. My parents signed everything over to me properly in 2003 with an attorney present, and the paperwork has been clean ever since. I tell you this so you understand. There was nothing ambiguous about what belonged to me. The portfolio had a divider tab. Sasha opened it to the second section. She said she'd been doing some research. She said the commercial real estate market in our area was unusually strong right now. That the Main Street corridor in particular was seeing offers 15 to 20% above assessed value. That a property like Mine Corner Lot, renovated in 2018, existing foot traffic would be very attractive to the right buyer. She used the word liquidate. She said it casually, the way you say reorganize or consolidate, like it was just a neutral financial term with no weight to it. I looked at my son. He was looking at the table. I said, James. He said, just hear her out, Mom. So I heard her out. The proposal, and it was a proposal, she had pages, was that I sell the bakery and the building. She had already spoken with a commercial real estate broker. She had already gotten a preliminary number. She had already apparently spent considerable time imagining the future of an asset that did not belong to her. The money, she said, could be divided, part to me for retirement, part invested as seed funding for a wellness concept she and James had been developing. A boutique spa and fitness studio. She had a name for it already. She turned to the page of the projected revenue model. I put my hand on the table. Flat. Palm down. I said, close that. She looked at James. He still wasn't looking at me. I said, quieter. Sasha. Close the portfolio. She closed it. I said, this bakery is not a retirement asset. It is not seed funding. It is not a piece of commercial real estate on a corridor. It is 41 years of my family's life, and I am not selling it, and this conversation is over. She smiled. It was a careful smile. She said she understood that this was a lot to take in, that of course there was no pressure, that she just wanted me to have all the information. James finally looked at me. He said, "Mom, we're not trying to take anything from you. We just want you to think about your future." I said I had thought about my future for 30 years and I was thinking about it just fine. They left 20 minutes later. Sasha took the portfolio with her. I thought that was the end of it. I washed the coffee cups. I put the leftover cake under the glass dome. I stood at the window and watched their car back out of the driveway, and I told myself it was over. It was just a moment of poor judgment. Sasha had always been ambitious, and sometimes ambitious people overstep, and that is just what happened here. I believed it for about 2 weeks. Then I started noticing things. There was a call from my accountant, Phil, a man I've worked with for 19 years. He called to let me know that someone had requested a copy of the bakery's last 3 years of tax returns. He wanted to make sure I'd authorized it. I had not authorized it. He told me the request had come from an address I didn't recognize. I called the address back. It was a commercial real estate consulting firm 40 miles away. I called James. He didn't answer. I left a voicemail. He texted back 2 hours later, "Mom, we can talk about this later. It's not a big deal, just gathering information." I sat down at my kitchen table, the same table where they'd sat with the portfolio, and I called my attorney, a woman named Carol, who has handled my business affairs for 12 years. I told her everything. I told her about the portfolio and the revenue projections and the broker and the tax returns. She said, "Dorothy, I want you to come in tomorrow." I went in the next morning. We talked for 2 hours. I won't explain all the legal specifics here because honestly some of it is still working through its process. But what Carol helped me do what we did together that week was something I should have done years earlier. We established a formal trust. The bakery, the building, the equipment, the mail order trademark, all of it went into a revocable living trust with me as the sole trustee. Carol drafted the documents. I reviewed every line. We filed everything correctly and completely. When it was done, I sat in Carol's office with a cup of bad waiting room coffee and I felt something I hadn't realized I had lost. I felt steady again. There's a particular kind of fear that comes when someone you love looks at the things you've built and sees only what they're worth in dollars. It gets into you quietly. It doesn't feel like fear. At first, it feels like confusion, like you must be misunderstanding something. Like surely the people you raised and the people they chose love you enough not to do this. And then the confusion curdles and becomes something colder. And you move through your days a little differently. You hold your keys a little tighter. You stop leaving the back door unlocked. I don't like that happened to me. But it did. The wedding was in April. They had gotten engaged the previous fall, before all of this started, or before I knew it had started anyway. The engagement had been sweet. I'd cried a little when James called me. I'd started looking for mother of the groom dresses in January. My invitation arrived in February. It had my name on it and everything. I was on the seating chart. I was listed in the program. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Sasha called me. She was very calm on the phone. She said she'd been doing a lot of reflecting. She said the wedding day was important to her emotionally, and she wanted it to feel peaceful, and she was worried that my presence would create tension, given our recent conversations. She said she hoped I would understand. She said she thought it would be better for everyone, and she said everyone, like she had surveyed everyone if I didn't attend. I said, "You're asking me not to come to my son's wedding." She said, "I'm asking you to respect what I need on my wedding day." I said, "Put James on the phone." There was a pause. Then James came on. "And my son, who has his father's hands and his father's way of going quiet, told me in a voice so careful it barely sounded like him, that he thought Sasha had a point, that maybe it would be better to let things settle down, that we could celebrate together after, just the 3 of us, and it would mean just as much." I didn't say what I was thinking. I didn't have the words for it yet, or maybe I had too many. I said, "All right, James." I hung up the phone. I sat in my kitchen for a long time. Then I went into the bakery and I worked for 5 hours. I made 3 batches of sourdough and 2 dozen lemon bars and a birthday cake for a customer named Helen, who was turning 80. I worked until my hands stopped shaking. The wedding was on a Saturday. I stayed home. I won't tell you I was fine. I wasn't fine. I sat on my porch with a cup of tea and I watched the neighbors' kids ride bikes in the cul-de-sac, and I thought about the morning James was born, how his father had held him up like something fragile and precious, and looked at me with this expression I'd never seen on his face before and have never seen since. I thought about James's high school graduation when he'd walked across the stage and scanned the crowd for me immediately. Before the photos, before his friends, he found my face first and waved. I thought about how much distance can open up in a person before you notice it happening. I was still on the porch when my phone rang that evening. It was a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. It was Sasha's mother. We had met twice, briefly, at family events. She was a quiet woman from Knoxville. I had liked her both times. She said, "Dorothy, I'm so sorry. I didn't know until this morning. I want you to know I think what she did is wrong." We talked for 20 minutes. I didn't say much. I mostly listened. But when I hung up, I felt something shift slightly. The way a window you've been pressing against finally gives a half inch. And you can breathe. 3 weeks later, James came to see me. He didn't call first. He knocked on the front door like a guest, which he had never done before in his life. He always used to just come in through the side, the way he had since he was 9 years old. I opened the door. He looked tired. He had lost some weight. He said, "Can I come in?" I stepped back and let him in. We sat in the kitchen. I did not offer coffee this time. I sat down and I folded my hands on the table, and I looked at my son and I waited for him to say what he'd come to say. He talked for a while. He said he was sorry. He said he should have done better by me. He said he had let someone else's voice get louder than his own conscience, and he knew that, and he was ashamed of it. He said the word ashamed, and it sounded like it cost him something. He said Sasha and he were having serious problems, that she was staying at her sister's, that he didn't know what came next. He started to cry. James has cried in front of me exactly 4 times in his adult life. This was the 4th. I listened to all of it. When he was done, I said, "I need you to hear me say something." He nodded. I said, "What hurt me was not that she wanted things. People want things. What hurt me is that you let her want them out of me. You let her come into my house with a folder and you sat there and you told me to hear her out. And then when I stood up for myself, you told me I was creating tension. That is what hurt me." He didn't say anything. There was nothing to say to that. I said, "The bakery is in a trust now. Carol drew up the papers in March. It's protected." He said, "Mom, I wasn't trying to." I said, "I know, but I had to protect it anyway." He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I didn't know about the tax return request. I want you to know that. That was her, not me." I looked at him. I believed him. I don't know if I was right to believe him, but I did. He asked if he could come see the bakery. We drove over together that afternoon. It was a Sunday and we were closed, but I have a key to every lock in that building, and I know where every switch is in the dark. I turned on the lights in the back kitchen, and the smell came up the way it always does: flour and butter and the faint sweetness of the proofing yeast. And James stood in the doorway the way he used to when he was small, like he wasn't sure he was allowed to come all the way in. I handed him an apron. He looked at it. I said, "Your grandmother taught me to make her buttermilk pie in this kitchen. Your father proposed to me in this kitchen. I want to teach you how to make the sourdough starter. It's time you knew." He put on the apron. We worked for 2 hours. I showed him how to feed the starter, how to tell by texture and smell when it was ready, how to fold the dough instead of punching it, because you want to build the structure gently. I told him, not knock it down. He was clumsy with it at first. He asked questions. Good questions. Careful ones. He has always been a person who asks careful questions when he finally decides to ask them. At some point, the light outside changed to that pale gold color it gets in late afternoon in April, and it came through the bakery window at an angle, and I thought of my mother standing in almost exactly this spot. And I did not say that out loud because some things you keep to yourself. I don't know what will happen with James and his wife. That is not my story to know yet. I know that I still get up at 4:45 every morning. I know the sourdough gets fed before I pour my own coffee. I know my name is on the deed and the trust documents, and the 41-year-old framed photograph above the register my mother and father on opening day. Flour on her apron, his arm around her shoulders, both of them squinting into the sun like they couldn't quite believe what they'd just done. I know that when I open the front door on a Monday morning and the smell comes up and the display case is empty and the whole day is still ahead of me, I feel something that does not have a simple name. Grateful, maybe. Stubborn, definitely. Still here. That is enough. That has always been enough. I've been thinking a lot lately about what it actually means to protect something. Not the legal version of it, the trust documents, the attorney meetings, the paperwork Carol helped me get right. Those things matter, and I'm grateful for every one of them. But I mean the quieter kind of protection. The kind that starts years before anyone shows up at your table with a folder. When Sasha laid out those pages in my kitchen, she believed she was looking at an opportunity. I think she genuinely did. She saw a building, a revenue stream, an aging woman who might be tired enough to let go. What she didn't see, what she couldn't have known, is that I had spent 41 years becoming someone who would not let go. That's not stubbornness for its own sake. It's something more like earned clarity. You work long enough at something real and you stop being confused about what it's worth. Not the dollar amount, the actual worth. James couldn't see that either for a while. And that is the part that still sits with me, even now. Because here's what I've come to understand. The people who hurt us most are rarely the strangers. They're the ones we open the door to, the ones we poured coffee for, the ones we taught to ride a bike in the driveway on a Saturday morning 30 years ago. When those people look past you toward what you have, it doesn't feel like betrayal right away. It feels like a mistake. You keep waiting for them to correct it. And while you're waiting, things can slip away from you if you're not paying attention. I was paying attention, eventually. What I want to say, what I keep coming back to, is that wisdom isn't something that arrives all at once. It accumulates the way a bakery does. One early morning at a time, one decision at a time, one moment of holding your ground when it would have been easier to give in. I did not always have the courage to hold my ground. There were years, long ones, when I said yes to things I should have questioned and stayed quiet when I should have spoken. I don't say that with shame. I say it because those years are part of how I got here. The afternoon James stood in my kitchen with an apron on and his hands in the dough, asking careful questions about fermentation and folding. That meant something to me I don't have a clean word for. It wasn't forgiveness exactly, though there was some of that in it. It was more like watching something find its way back to its right shape. People can do that. It takes longer than we want and it costs more than it should. But they can. I don't know who's sitting with something heavy right now. A family that's pulling in two directions. A piece of your life that someone has decided is theirs to negotiate with. A child who got turned around by someone else's ambitions. If that's you, I just want to say that protecting what you've built is not selfishness. Standing firm is not cruelty. Knowing your own worth and refusing to be talked out of it is not an obstacle to love. It's a condition of it. The people who truly love you will eventually understand that. And the ones who don't, well, they'll find their own way to that understanding. Or they won't. That part is not yours to carry. What is yours? The work, the name above the door, the starter that needs feeding before your first cup of coffee, the things that were here before anyone arrived with a folder, and the things that will still be here long after. That cast iron stand is still by the window.